The Raptors are always on the lookout for a disgruntled superstar. Ever since we acquired Kawhi Leonard, Masai Ujiri's been keeping those binoculars open, looking for disgruntled superstars. And now the Raptors seem to have their sights set on Shai Gilgeous-Alexandar. According to a league insider, the Raptors are monitoring that situation over in OKC, hoping Shai becomes disgruntled. So I'll break down that report in this video, as well as the first start of training camp. It's begun for the Raptors, and we have a bunch of interesting storylines, including the emergence of Dalano, Banton, and Scottie Barnes potentially running the point guard position for this team. So a bunch of stuff to dive into. Without further ado, let's dive straight into it. Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Guy, just breaking down the latest Toronto Raptors news. And folks, as I said in the intro, the Raptors basketball, it's returning, it's just around the corner. And if you guys want to stay up to date on everything surrounding the Toronto Raptors, subscribe to the Raptors Digest. It helps us out big time. But let's dive straight into the news. And the first thing we're talking about is Dalano Banton being the best player on the court for day one of training camp. Now, Dalano's a guy that's been working hard. He's been playing on Team Canada, the team that played down in the tournament in Brazil, not with the regular Team Canada team. It was interesting that he chose to play with that squad. I'm not sure how the schedule worked out and all that sort of stuff. But Nick Nurse had a couple of interesting takes on terms of players that were showing out, that were balling out in day one of training camp. And Nurse confirmed that 20 players on the team in training camp are healthy and participated in the first practice. So that's a positive. He gave a shout out to Bo Cruz, the Cruz missile, Juancho Hernan-Gomez, as an early standout. But he mentioned that the best player on the court, the best player in his mind, Dalano Banton, said he was as good as anybody out there today. So, it's nice to see a couple guys that are going to be certainly fighting for rotation minutes. Dalano Banton, if he can step up and fulfill that backup point guard duties, because obviously Fred VanVleet and potentially Scottie Barnes, as we're going to be discussing later in this video, but we don't really have one of those guys to back up our main point guard position. Malachi Flynn could potentially do it, right? He's a guy that I know a lot of Raptors fans are very high on, but there's question marks there still, and Dalano Banton's another guy that's thrown his name into the race, along with Jeff Doughton, our two-way player. So if Dalano Banton can come out, show that he's not going to turn over the basketball. He's going to be a little bit more in control, more ready to go, use his size to pass and facilitate like we know he can, and hopefully have a developed jump shot, a little refined jump shot coming into the season. That's going to be huge for this team. And obviously you can't extrapolate too much from day one of training camp, but a couple guys in Dalano as well as Juancho Hernan-Gomez that will be nice pieces to round out our bench going into this year. Them playing well is a positive sign. But the next thing we're talking about, the next thing we're discussing is Scottie Barnes starting at the point guard position. A little question mark in there because, we talked about it, media day, right when the Raptors came back before training camp sort of begun, Scottie Barnes made it known. I am a point guard. That's what I am. It's the position I play. I can do anything out there, right? I'm not limiting myself to a certain role. However, I'm Scottie Barnes. I look at myself as a point guard. I went to college to play at the point guard position, right? That's why I went to this. Oh my goodness, the name of his school slipped me. The school in Florida, but apparently that might get applied to the Toronto Raptors now as well. As Nick Nurse came out and said that Fred VanVleet is going to be playing off the ball a lot. Says that that's where we're going to see, that's what we've seen again, the shift in Scottie, Pascal, and even OG probably bringing the ball up the court, and spraying it out with Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. on the perimeter for those catch and shoot looks. Now that's a quote from Media Day. He also spoke with Tim from Tim and Friends, and essentially broke down that during the end of the playoffs, we saw what point Scottie looked like. Fred VanVleet was forced to sit out due to injury, and Scottie was essentially unleashed as that main facilitator, that main ball handler, and Nurse said we're going to see a lot more of it this season. And given the fact he wants Fred VanVleet playing off the ball a bit more, which I think completely makes sense. We won a championship with Fred VanVleet playing off of guys like Kyle Lowry and Kawhi and all that sort of stuff, playing more off-ball action. I think Fred's just remarkable shooting ability, paired whether it be off the dribble or on the catch, right? He's elite in both aspects. Him being a floor spacer along with Gary Trent Jr. just makes more sense than having sort of Scottie Barnes, who isn't much of a three-point shooter at this point in his career, be looking to cut for dunker spots and, space the floor that way, right? Rather than two elite shooters already on your wings. And where Scottie has already shown the ability to man the point guard position, I think it makes a whole bunch of sense. It's something that's worked in the past. When Kyle Lowry was out there facilitating, he was the same height as Fred VanVleet. Fred VanVleet's defense to guard smaller guards is still going to be utilized, still be valuable. And you got that extra shooting. You got that extra floor spacing, right? Having Scottie Barnes create, we didn't even need to acquire a shooter. If we just put the more creator role onto Scottie and the more shooting role, the more spot up positions for Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr., it's an easy way to up our shooting, to keep our level of defense and keep all the options open for this team. So I think this is the right direction for Nick Nurse to sort of go with, but we'll see what ends up happening once the season actually comes around. And if they actually declare Scottie Barnes as the starting point guard and Fred as the starting two, which I think would just be cool. I think it just makes sense given both the players' skill sets. Fred's obviously a more elite shooter, more elite, shot creators on the wings, whereas Scottie can create more for other people and drive the basket, be more of a threat with the ball in his hands. So it's a positive direction I see the Toronto Raptors going in. But the next thing we're talking about, and it's a thing that's had been spoken on a bunch over the past couple of months, and it's the Raptors closely monitoring Shai Gilgeous-Alexandar's availability. Now, for the past 2 years, every Toronto Raptors fan has wanted Shai to be on this team. They look at the Oklahoma City Thunder tanking and they say, why don't we just pick him up? Why don't we he doesn't fit their young timeline of tanking and going through their own process, right? Why don't we just acquire him? And that's apparently what the Raptors have in the back of their minds as well, according to this report. And they're saying, this is coming from Josh Lewenberg, one of the situations that they're closely monitoring, according to a league source, is in Oklahoma City, where Toronto-born star Shai Gilgeous-Alexandar may eventually tire of leading a rebuild. The Thunder have gone 46 and 108 over the past 2 years and seem close to turning a corner, especially after losing second overall pick Chet Holmgren in the offseason due to a foot injury. So that's what Josh Lewenberg came out and saying, and this has a lot of Raptors fans just juiced. We're excited. We want to see a little trade machine come out, right? A little trade machine, some action where we end up acquiring our guy Shai Gilgeous-Alexandar. And while I join that sentiment amongst Raptors fans and saying, hey, if we can get Shai, bring him in. If he's disgruntled, bring him in. Do everything you can. I don't think this is actually a realistic thing to be looking at least for the next couple of seasons. Firstly, Sam Presti has indicated they have no desire, no indication to trade Shai Gilgeous-Alexandar. So they're not trying to trade their star players at this point to get more future draft picks. They're done with that sort of route. It's not the same. They're not going to do the same thing they did with Russell Westbrook as well as Paul George. That's the first thing. Second thing, Shai has said himself, I'm committed to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, obviously, a lot of people say that, and then they demand trades 3 months later or whatever, but the Oklahoma City Thunder, while it may feel like a very long time, they've only really been tanking for 2 seasons, and they have a lot of young talent on that squad. When you look at Lou Dort, Josh Giddey, Chet Holmgren, who will be out for this year, a bunch of mid to late first rounders that could develop that they currently have on the squad. I don't know what you think of Alexei Pokusevski, but he's another piece that they have as well, but they have some pieces. They have some guys on their team that could potentially be good, and they still have a multitude of assets to get better quickly if they really need to. So I see why Shai is optimistic about the future, even if they have to go through one more season of rebuilding. But I'd more so look at this and say 2 years down the line, 2 years away, that's when we can start hyping up the Shai bandwagon. He's locked into Oklahoma City Thunder under contract till 2025. So, a 2024 off season, that's when you might be able to sort of swoop in and acquire the guy. But, if they struggle, which is likely this season and then the year after, that's when I think Shai's disgruntlement will actually show. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. I don't think it's going to be in the next few months. But again, it's the NBA. People are demanding trades left, right, and center. So let me know in the comment section below what you would give up if Shai ended up demanding a trade in the next 24 hours. I don't know. What are you offering to Oklahoma City? But the next thing we're talking about, the next thing we're diving into is Norman Powell. Huge fan. I was living on Norm Island for a long time. But apparently, a little bit of bad blood, a little bit of spite still held the Toronto Raptors following his a little bit abrupt trade down in the Tampa tanking seasons about a year and a half ago. So Norman Powell was obviously a guy that came up with our current main core roster players. Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, Norman Powell, they were amongst the same group of guys that came in, and Norman Powell won a championship for this team, and he was having his best season ever with the Toronto Raptors the year that we ended up dealing him away. So it was a little bit of a shock, and I'd say it was definitely a shock to Norman Powell when he ended up getting moved to the Portland Trailblazers in a deal that ended up sending us back Gary Trent Jr. I was pretty shook at the deal. Not mad that we acquired Trent Jr., just mad that one of my favorite players ended up going out, and Norm was frustrated about that as well. He was surprised. He thought he was a part of that core group that was rebuilding and turning things around, and apparently he's not let go of that frustration, that little bit of spite he's had with getting traded. So apparently, so here's the quote: Norman Powell and what teams he's looking forward to facing, and there's not one team I have circled besides the Toronto Raptors. So Norm is focused. Now maybe this could be a joking jab because he still has a bunch of friends on the team and all this sort of stuff, but I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if Norm is a little bit still cheesed. Obviously, the Blazers, they were doing their tanking thing to acquire players, so I don't think he's mad at the Blazers for sending him off. But given the relationships, given the tenure he had with the Raptors, and the fact that he thinks he would have had a serious impact, he should have been a guy that's kept along for the old timeline, right? I think I see where Norm's at, and it's going to be fun to see Norman Powell try to go ham against our younger guys now in squad. And those Clippers-Raptors games are always a bit of fun, especially if Kawhi Leonard's back healthy and all that sort of stuff. So Norman Powell, wishing him the best, even if he's out for blood against us Toronto Raptors team. He's got a Raptors tattoo, though, so life is all good on that front. But the final thing we're discussing, the final thing we're talking about is Thaddeus Young recruiting free agents to the Toronto Raptors. Now, Thaddeus Young, obviously, people underestimate the value of veterans on a team, especially a young team. I've been talking about looking at quotes he's had the offseason, just his all-around game, his hustle, everything that he provides this team. Thaddeus Young is a huge addition. But one thing that we might have overlooked in terms of bringing back Thaddeus Young is his relationships across the NBA, as it may have landed us our big free agent signing. Some people have been saying it's the biggest free agent signing in Raptors history. And, I think that might be a stretch. Maybe best signing for a guy that wasn't already on our team. You could say that. You might be able to argue that. I think our biggest signing ever, how sad it may be, is DeMarre Carroll back in 2016, I believe. That 2016 season, because the guy was on that 60-something win team, Hawks team. He was named, 4 guys on their starting lineup were named All-Stars, and then people said, oh, why isn't DeMarre Carroll an All-Star this year too? And he was supposed to be a LeBron stopper. He was a highly touted free agent. Now, he definitely didn't work out for us, but I think that might be one of the biggest names we've actually signed in free agency. But I digress on that point. I'm not getting into a weird DeMarre Carroll situation. But this is essentially what's coming out. But one of the first people Otto Porter called when he was making his free agent decision and considering Toronto is his former Bulls teammate, Thaddeus Young. Thad said, he's one of my better friends in the league, and he asked me questions, and I said, come through, sign the deal, and let's go. And Thad also said that it wasn't a question about him coming back to the team. He loved this organization. He loved his short time here last season. So, Thaddeus Young's out there using his relationships across the NBA to throw some good words in about the Toronto Raptors, and that's absolutely huge because Otto Porter, as I went on that weird rant about DeMarre Carroll, maybe the biggest free agent signing in Raptors history, right? He's a guy that just coming off a championship. He's a 3-and-D player. He started on a championship team. I think that's getting overlooked because he's going to be coming in here and surely coming off the bench, but he's a starting caliber guy on an NBA championship team. Or at least he can start. He started some games, came off the bench. I don't know. He started at times throughout the season. I don't know if he was actually in that starting unit. They had Draymond. They started Looney. Starting caliber player, a rotation piece on a championship team. He wasn't starting on that squad. My mistake. But, he knocks down the three, plays elite defense. He knows how to play within a system, and he's a guy that can take on a scoring load if he's asked to, right? He was a key option for those, especially Bulls teams and Chicago and Washington Wizards teams before he ended up going down with a couple of injuries. So it's, shout out that, bringing in Otto Porter. Happy that we got a few vets now coming off the bench with the squad. But let me know what you guys think about everything that's been going around in Raptors land. Are you guys excited for the season coming up? Let me know in the comment section below. Check out the Instagram, the TikTok, the Twitter, all that cool stuff. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.